Hello, star people and awakened souls. Thank you so much for joining me again for Ascend the Matrix podcast. I'm your host, Chrys King. I'm the creator of medicinealchemist.com, ascended-astrology.com, and of course, chrisking.com. I'm a psychic, business mentor, shamanic healer, astrologer, ascension guide, and I help awakened souls, star seeds, light workers remember who they are, tap out of the matrix, and ascend into their highest timeline. And I'm so excited to welcome someone who was a fundamental part of my spiritual expansion and journey, not only as a psychic medium, but as a shamanic healer. Her name is Jen Fields. Many of you know of her as I've spoken of her many times before. Jen is a sacred sexuality guide, Akashic Channel, and shamanic healer herself. And she's also an author. Her work explores Eros, Eros, as a path to spiritual awakening and divine remembrance, weaving together erotic mysticism, love it, tantra-based ritual, and the healing power of grief. And she is going to speak to that today very strongly. Through her writing, ceremonies, and one-to-one offerings, she helps others reclaim their sensual aliveness and connect to the sacred pulse within. She is also the author of an incredible book that I'm featured in called Melody of Fire, which is a true story of spirituality, sexuality, and surrender. Thank you so much, Jen Fields, for being here. Welcome.
Thank, thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm excited that you're here too, because we have had many conversations in our history together in this incarnation and
Mhm.
many experiences. I'm just going to put that generally, that others would find shocking, taboo, strange, weird out there. So I'm going to open the space and let us go into all of these different directions. But I really want the audience to get to know you a little bit. I want you to talk about what you do, but how you got here, because you have quite a background. You live in Tennessee,
Mhm.
and how you came into this and the work that you're doing today is quite diametrically opposed to how you were raised and the good old people you come from. So I want you to
Mhm.
take us back then to little Jen, back in time in this incarnation anyway, because we could go back all the way to the time of Lemuria if we wanted to. But
Yes,
tell us about you and how you got to this point.
absolutely. Yeah, I was born and raised in Tennessee, right in the middle of the Appalachian Mountains, and it is the buckle of the Bible Belt. So surrounded by Southern Baptists predominantly. Teachings. There's a church on every corner. My family is deeply religious. Um, I don't know if spiritual would be the right word until lately, but I was brought up in church. I was there every time the door was opened. Um, I was the drama leader at our church. I wrote our skits and our plays that we did for
I
like
was going to be like,
Easter.
let's be very clear about what we mean by drama leader, because there's lots of drama leaders at these churches, okay?
Yeah,
But we're talking
uh-huh.
about theater.
Yes, yes. I'd like to think I wasn't in the other drama, but I got pulled in unwillingly. So
Yeah, you may have some air signs in your chart.
yeah, just that. um, yeah, so that was my childhood, that was my upbringing. But around the time that I was 13, 14, I started um, noticing that I felt different than my peers, and it was showing up in my sexuality. Like I was just very attracted to women, didn't
Hmm.
notice men at all, and I knew what the repercussions for that would be, even at that age, because I was just like steeped in this deep religious, environment. And when um, I met my first girlfriend at church.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. And so we, would sneak around for a while, and then finally we got caught. Somebody saw us out holding hands in a park, and you know how church gossip. But back to the drama, the church drama.
Yeah.
Ringleader saw us in the park holding hands, and it just exploded. And so I kind of got drug out of the closet at that point, and my church humiliated myself and my
Mm.
girlfriend at the time. They made me step down from being the drama leader, the theater leader, and my family. It was really really hard with my family as well. And I didn't speak to them for a while. And it was really, really rough for about 10 years um, between my family and myself. And I never went back to the church. And I kind of, um, you know, was seeking because the spiritual part of faith always felt aligned to me, and it felt easy, and it felt like something that I deeply connected with. It was the religious structure and
Right.
the patriarchal, rigidness of it that I just couldn't find a home for. And when all of that happened with my family and my church, I just threw up my hands and was like, screw it. I'm not going to have anything to do with spirituality, period. Dot. To walk away.
That's exactly how I felt as well. I'm sorry to interrupt, but
No.
just for those listening, you may hear a lot of resonance within yourself where many of us, because I've had a lot of sexual shame in this lifetime, and it feels like both of, I mean, just gay people, queer people, we have this shame around our sexuality. So even if there wasn't abuse or darker aspects of sexual shame that had come in our childhood, just our very being, the
Mm-hmm.
beginning of who we are, especially because many of us grew up in very religious environments. And back in the 70s and 80s and 90s, this was a Christian country, okay? It was just
Mm-hmm.
commonplace for people to be going to church and believing in Christ. And it's just so different now. But I had the same experience with being so drawn to church when my parents never went. I was so drawn to it, wanted to go with friends, wanted to go
Mm-hmm.
with my aunt who was a children's minister, and I wanted that feeling so bad that they were all, they would cry and they would feel him, and I wasn't feeling it.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's a lot of our, us star seeds, light workers. We have a lot of, like contracts with dissolving these religions. So we sort of start there, but also where else are we going to step into our sexual power from, but then the most sexually repressed areas on the planet. So I just
Absolutely.
wanted to make a note of that, especially because it definitely laid the groundwork for your human even desiring to want to step into the work that you've stepped into.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, yeah, you're exactly right on that. And the shame, that got entwined with faith, right? I didn't know how to like extract that from that because our bodies are evil and full of sin, and we cause, women cause men to veer off track, and it was, it was pretty intense, and it still
You
is.
all do, though. I mean,
Yeah, we
look
do.
how beautiful you are. I mean, it definitely happens. But I hear you on
Yeah.
the programming that was
Yeah.
embedded in there, and also was in your cells from the ancestors that you came from.
Yeah, exactly. And I just didn't know if I would ever be able to find the good in that anymore. So I just, I threw the baby out with the bathwater in a big way at that
Did
time in
you
my
become
life.
atheist or agnostic or anything like that, where you were? Because I did. I remember a period of time in my late teens where I was atheist. I tried to be. Spirit did
Yeah.
not let that happen very long. And it was
Yeah.
an empty feeling, but I needed to go in that dark room. That was
Hmm.
sort of my rock bottom spiritually.
Yeah. Um, I knew I wasn't an atheist because I knew that I believed in something. I still felt, even at that age, this was probably, I was like 20, 21 when all this happened. And even then, I knew there was something moving. I just was really afraid of it. Honestly, it was because like whatever that was, that God obviously did not love me.
Yeah.
So I felt like I couldn't connect with it. So I really resonated with the word agnostic because it, just without knowing is what it means. And so I felt
Right.
like that's where I landed. And I was like, you know what? I don't know how anyone can claim to know.
Right.
So that was the space that I lived in for several years, just sort of fumbling around, and I avoided conversations about spirituality. I didn't want anything to do with it. I just didn't want any part of it. And then I had a meeting with a renowned psychic that lived in our area, and that's when things started moving again, because he basically told me everything that was going to happen to me like 10 years. And so to me at the time, the things that he was telling me, career out um, with a man. And I was like, okay. um, and so there were just things that I just didn't believe. And then it all started unfolding.
Give me just a second.
And I
You're,
couldn't deny
I don't know if you can hear
that
me right
anymore.
now, but you're breaking up.
Yeah.
Um, y- when you went into the renowned psychic,
Yeah. I
the
can hear
connection
you.
started to break up. So now it's clear, of course. So I would love for you to take me back
Okay. Of
to, you
course it
said
is.
something about 10 years or something like that. Back, I want you to start over with this renowned
Okay.
psychic because we sort of missed it and you were
Sure.
frozen. Because now we're
Okay.
back.
All right.
Okay.
Okay. Yes, I went to see a renowned psychic. He lived in the area, and he told me a lot of things that just didn't feel believable to me at the time.
Like what?
He told me that I would have a career in singing, and at the time, I didn't sing a note, like wouldn't even sing in the shower.
Wow.
And I was like, I don't sing at all. That's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And he told me that that I was going to fall in love with a man, and that it was the reason why I incarnated in this lifetime. That there was
Whoa.
a lesson that needed to be resolved.
Whoa.
Yeah, and I think I told him because the language that he was using, I was so unfamiliar with, like even spirit guides and things like that. I was like, what, like,
Contracts,
yeah, like
karma, Akashic. Yeah.
who are you talking to? And like, I
Right.
just couldn't like make it make sense.
Yeah.
And I think I told him at one point that I thought that my guardian angels had been day drinking because that was like not my future, like no way.
Yeah.
And I was really disappointed when I left there. Um, and about 5 years passed after that meeting, and everything started unfolding, just as he said. And there was this huge, huge awakening. Um,
And
and
when did this awakening happen for you? What year?
oh, let's see, it would have been hmm, well, the bulk of it, I started singing on my 30th birthday. So 2010, I
Mm-hmm.
started singing.
Yeah.
I just, on a whim, I bought myself voice lessons for my 30th birthday. And I had forgotten about this meeting with the psychic because I thought it was just nonsense, wrote it off, didn't think
Right.
another thing about it. And it just snowballed. Like it was like a magic wand. I just took to it like I had been doing it my whole life.
Yeah.
And the next thing I knew, I was in a band and playing shows every Thursday, Friday, Saturday night. We
Wow.
recorded music,
Wow.
and so it was then that I, you know, realized that okay, he told me all of this,
Yeah.
and I don't know how much of it's going to happen, but clearly he was onto something,
Yeah.
and I couldn't write it off anymore. And then I met so the man that he told me that I was going to fall in love with, he actually gave me his name, but he gave me his name in a way that I didn't put it together until it happened. So his name is Jason, and he in the meeting, the psychic told me I would fall in love with a man named Jay.
Wow.
And yeah, and so it just didn't. I didn't connect the wires because I'm an idiot,
Wow.
clearly. But when we finally like deeply connected and realized that we were in love with each other, for some reason it just transitioned to me calling him Jay,
Yeah.
and then I remembered.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh wow, okay,
Well,
this is
let's
yeah.
go to that moment. When did you meet
Mm,
this person? So, because for those listening, the book "The Melody of Fire" is in reference to this Jay person that we're talking about, who is also here
mm,
with us in spirit on this
mm.
podcast, and may have been the cause of our little static issue that I'm being told to keep in and not edit out, because that never happens. So we're just going to ask that because we like big men, but don't step in front of the antenna. Okay. So,
Uh-huh.
so it's 2010, 2011. You're singing like 2012 comes along, which is it's the year of my twin flame karmic relationship that I had,
Mhm.
which was not pleasant at all, which was a karmic contract. But
Yeah.
2012 seems to be like a threshold for many of us. So when
Mhm.
did you meet this Jay? And
So
I like to make it the infamous Jay.
the infamous Jay, yeah, who messes with technology really well. He does that often.
Yes,
So
yes, he
I'm not
did.
surprised.
And so I've already asked him not to do it again.
Uh-huh. So oddly enough, because spirit works the way spirit does, I met Jay when I was 17. And mhm.
I did not know this.
Yes. And he and his girlfriend at the time would later be his wife. I worked with her in the mall, and he worked right across at the music store. And so I saw him every day. And then we actually moved, or they moved. I was with my current girlfriend at the time, and they moved into the apartment above us. And so we were neighbors for 3 years.
Oh my God, how does this,
Uh-huh.
I mean, just
I know.
it was just waiting for the timeline. I mean, there were so many different timelines where you all had crossed and had already
Oh,
activated. And in this
yes.
timeline, it kept making sure that it was going to happen. It's just wild.
Yes. And when I look back about what Bobby Drennan, the psychic, told me, um, about it being the reason, like the lesson that needed to be resolved and why I incarnated this time, that makes so much sense, because it was almost like spirits like, here it is again, here it is a different way. There was no way that this was not going to happen.
Right.
When I look back on it, it was just totally unavoidable. But because we were good friends, and I knew that he was a musician, and when I started taking singing lessons, I auditioned for a couple musicals. And one of the shows I auditioned for needed a bass player, and I happened to think of him. And I was like, I know a bass player. He might want to do this because he's done theater before. And so I called him, and he was really excited about it. And he came on board the project. And then through that theater project, we started writing music together and singing together.
And what year was this?
That was 2012.
Ah,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
But it was really it was platonic. It was really, really deep friendship, but totally platonic. Um,
Well, yeah, a married man and a
and
lesbian.
I was married to a woman at the time, and yeah, and yeah,
A
I was married.
lesbian, as we would
A,
call it in Atlanta. Okay.
a lesbian. I love it.
A
Uh-huh.
lesbian.
Yeah, and men just, I have really close, deep friendships with men in my life, and I just never even considered them as a romantic possibility. Like, it wasn't on my radar. And so we wrote so well together and performed so well together. It was just magic. We had a really large band. And in the meantime, that we were playing, and the shows kept getting bigger and more often, my wife at the time had a really big problem with the amount of time that music was taking. And so as music was taking off, my marriage was disintegrating. And it got to the point that I ultimately sort of had to pick between staying in my marriage or stopping my music career. And I tried stopping music for a little bit, um, completely crumbled, felt like I gave up on myself, and was just really, really miserable. And so Jay and I talked about it. And at the time, the band that I quit was a large band. And he was like, what if we just did like a little side project, like a little duo singer songwriter thing that wouldn't be all of this, and maybe that would go well. And when I presented that idea to my wife, that was the night that we split. Because
Wow.
she just was like, I can't, like, I know it will be more than um just a show here and there. And she was right, like, to her credit. And I also feel like she was deeply intuitive. I think she probably
She
sensed
may have
more of the
just
connection.
stepped out of the way.
Yeah, I feel like she sensed more of the connection than I even did at the time.
Yeah.
in retrospect. But after my divorce, he and I did start that little side project. He stayed with the big band, and then we had the side project. And that's when it came up in conversation, and it was like when I quit music, it killed us both.
Yeah.
And he was like, I thought I'd lost you forever, and I just don't ever want to feel like that again. And told me that he was in love with me, and yeah. Yeah, it was really romantic and very
Yes.
sweet, and it just felt right. Like it just I had this like voice in the back of my mind that was like, bitch, you are gay. Like but then my heart was like, no, but like he is everything. Like he it wasn't just the music. In retrospect,
Yeah.
it was like what we were creating together.
Yeah.
And creative intimacy, that synergy is like nothing else. And
It
I
is
think
sexual. It is
it is.
sensual.
Yeah, I think it's um I think the sensual nature of that is comparable to sexual connection. Like I think it's the same energy and the same like vibration. And when I'm,
Absolutely.
working with clients, that's like one of the doorways that I lead them through, through is like what brings you like deep pleasure, and what can you do just for the sake of like how you feel in your body. Um,
Yeah. Can you tell us just right now, because we're going to go back to Jay, a little bit about the work that you do and what you offer clients? You just mentioned that. Can you go into that?
sure. So more of this story I know we're going to get into, but I went through a deep season of grief through this whole relationship too, and what I learned through that was that grief and um, union, or like sexual um, wholeness,
Yeah.
are sort of two sides of the same blade,
Mm.
if you will, and they both require a deep surrender, even though one is usually willingly and the other is not.
Yeah.
But it's the breaking open um, to the deepest, like most intense emotions that we hold as humans. And so, really, there's multiple doorways to get into the same space, the same vibration, the spirit realm, of that just like expansiveness and wholeness and union and like deep unconditional love. And so one of the things that I do when I work with clients is, and a lot of times they come to me not because they're seeking the bliss side, or the tantra rituals and all of that. They're coming
Right.
to me because they're deeply grieving.
Yeah.
And so it's holding space for that and showing how it really is like as tall as it is deep, right? Like the grief is like deep, 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 and then the
However much
expansiveness is.
pleasure you can feel is how much pain you will endure from its absence, in this
Yeah.
duality. How human is that? How
Mm-hmm.
scorpionic is
Mm-hmm.
that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. uh, yes. So that's a big part of my work. And I go into the spirit realm, immediately with clients, and we just see where they're at and what I can do. And sometimes that's just holding space and reflecting back to them, like where they are. And sometimes it's really practical things, like I was talking about the pleasure and how, like, moving through your body to see what's ready to be released, or to be looked at, or to be sat with, or the like generative process of like creation,
Yeah.
to get in that space too.
Yeah. Do you work with mostly females or do you work with genderqueer individuals, males?
It's mostly female, but I have had some men too.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah,
Love
and
that.
I do too. It's funny because if you'd asked me, if you'd asked me if I've been doing any of this 15 years ago, I would have said that you were crazy, but in general. But I would have thought that I would have been more comfortable with women, but I just have this connection with the masculine that
Yeah.
allows me to like show up and offer that vibration that they need to like click in. So
Yes.
it yeah, so I'm always like really really happy when when masculine energies show up. And I do have some, gender queer folks that have come, and that's interesting and fun, like in a whole other way, because I get to
Yeah.
see like what energy and what medicine that they hold and how they are
Yeah.
showing up and what resonates more with them. And sometimes it's not always how they're presenting, it's what's on the inside is different. And
That's
so
right.
that's, yeah, it's
Yeah,
really neat.
like with myself, I can present, I guess, masculine. I don't know how people perceive me always, but
Yeah.
there's just so much happening on the inside that isn't really reflected out here. So it takes people being able to have the eyes to see that. So that's
Mhm.
beautiful that
Mhm.
you caught that nuance and that you are sensitive to it. But you're a queer individual yourself, so there's
Right.
already a proclivity toward that. Um,
Mhm.
Now, speaking of welcoming masculine into your space, I mean, what was it like being divorced? After being married to a woman, after, coming out in the world as this proud lesbian, and, just being everything your family, didn't expect you to be, and, being a singer, and, you have attracted this divine masculine, creative partner into your life, and take us
Mhm.
into the whirlwind romance that ensued from there.
Sure. Um, well, I initially had, you know, all of the resistance, like all of it, like all the things that you would think that came up. And my biggest fear, I remember, because I had just gotten back to the point where things with my family were good. We'll say good, not great, but we communicated well. They were back in my life. I was back in their life, and I was just so afraid that they were going to think that I put all of us as a unit through that for nothing.
Right.
Like for,
Right.
and I was like, how do I come back and be like, just kidding? Like after like 12, 14 years of just like, strife like with them. It
Yeah, and
was,
also for me, I can sort of sense this sort of imposter syndrome. What if they, what if I prove them right? Like it is just a phase, gay people are
oh,
choosing it. You know what I
oh,
mean? I can feel
yes.
that right
Yeah,
now.
yes. And I will say that that even is a big fear of mine, or has been, that I've just sort of had to let go over and over and over again. But because I came from that church culture where things were weaponized, I had this huge fear that my book, when it came out, would be used as a see, like not
Yeah.
every, yeah, you can convert back to, you can be straight, you can, and I didn't
Jesus
want that.
found you through this man and he helped you
Uh-huh.
come back, no pun intended, to your, good Christian nature.
Yeah, exactly. So when I talk about my book, always really want to, let it be known that I am still, the biggest ally, and that's the last thing in the world that I would want, is for my story to be weaponized in that way,
Yeah.
because that was all coming up for me in that moment, all the resistance around it. But then when he and I were together, like it just didn't matter. Like it just
Yeah.
didn't matter. And we talked about sex for probably 3 months before anything happened, because he was married and I love his family, still do. And didn't want to hurt anybody, and he didn't either. It was just this whole thing. And so it was really tentative. It was really romantic. There was like so many words and so many poems and songs, and like that it came through in that way, once we both had sort of acknowledged it and validated it for each other. But when we finally did have sex, it exploded my system. Like I had a
It was like that.
it was exactly like that. I'm pretty sure I heard that in the moment.
Yes.
But I had a Kundalini awakening through that, and that's when my gifts started coming online.
Yeah.
And Jay was,
And of course you would, because before we go any further, and I'm sorry to interrupt,
yeah,
um, for
okay,
those
so keep
listening,
going.
we are about to get into the twin flame thing. Okay.
Mhm.
So, um, there's so much BS out in the world around the twin flame idea, and it's because of capitalism and because of wanting to create a brand out of something that's really just an organic, natural process or something that happens in the universe. The whole thing with the twin flame cults and twin flame guides and all this has a lot of people, whenever they hear twin flame, they turn it off. They're like, I don't want to hear about that. Same
Mhm.
thing when they hear about, plant medicines, they'll turn their ear. I don't want to hear about that. It's just a bunch of hippies wanting to trip out in the woods. There's preconceived notions that even spiritual folk, ascended souls will have about certain concepts that are overly talked about and overly glamorized. And there's a
Mhm.
lot of glamour around the twin flame idea. And, it's just the ultimate hierogamic union of oneness and romance. And it couldn't be
Mhm.
further from the truth. Not that it's not there. All of
Right.
that is there, but they're missing, because
Mhm.
they're so love and light, they're missing the darker aspect of it. They're missing the actual lesson in the twin flame um, handbook, the guide. There's kind of an overarching theme
Was there a
of
handbook? I didn't get the handbook. I'm
you
really,
know like the
I'm kind of mad
handbook for
about
the
that.
recently deceased and Beetlejuice.
Uh-huh.
It's like we get one of these for, the handbook for our twin flame guides. Expect to be torn open and ripped apart and put back together again. So before we go any further,
Uh-huh.
for those listening, this story is not going to go in the direction that you're expecting. It's as human and as beautifully dark um, and twisty and exciting as it can be. So, Jen, I want you to keep going, but I just want to preface that, because as we talk about twin flames going forward, we're talking about it from someone's real perspective in it, and we're going to
Mhm.
be real about it and what comes up in that process, because there are so many people out there claiming that they are in a twin flame relationship. They're my twin flame. Just because you all get along and I mean, just like every person who gets in an argument with their partner is an empath, and their partner is a narcissist now. Every
Narcissist, yeah.
single one of them.
Mhm.
I have a family member who thinks she's an empath, and I said, why do you think that? Because he's a narcissist. And I said, do
Oh,
you absorb other people's emotions? And she's like, what do you mean by that? And I was like, I got it.
yeah.
I got you. Okay, you saw a meme, and because he's a narcissist, that makes you an empath. It's just all of this Facebook, Instagram, TikTok hoopla going on. So let's
It
speak to the
is.
twin flame experience,
Sure.
because when you meet your twin flame, it is, I mean, it's just like, whoa, it is a reclamation of remembrance of something. So I want you to keep going, but I wanted to make sure, for those listening, don't check out just yet, because we have a totally different perspective for you.
Absolutely. And I, because of this story, have a lot of people come to me wanting to like talk through this and work through this too. And so, without going like too far in it, I just want to say that the twin flame journey is deeply rooted in unconditional love. Deeply rooted in unconditional love. That doesn't mean that they're not going to hold up a mirror to all your shit. But I
That's
never,
what tests the unconditional love.
exactly. I never doubted for a millisecond how loved I was in that relationship. Like I never had a minute of like, he doesn't love me. Like, and y'all, it was hell because he was married. And it was, we would come together and have these like mind-blowing, intense love making sessions that were like 3-4 hours long, and like I would have these visions of us in other lifetimes, and then he would leave and go home to someone else. And it was the hardest thing ever, but I never doubted, I never doubted that.
You never felt like the mistress. You felt like you were just in a complicated 3D triangle of contracts and agreements, that
Yeah.
it just happened this way. And it's actually more cool that it happened this way from a book or movie perspective. But being in it, it just creates this yearning and this longing and this test for your
Totally.
human.
Yes, every day, every day. I couldn't ever call him when I wanted to. I couldn't ever, it's not like I could just see him if I had a bad day. Like it didn't go that way. I, um, but I hear people talking about it's like I'm in this really fucking toxic relationship with this person, and they're dragging me around and they're cheating on me and they're doing all this stuff, but it's my twin flame. And to me, that makes me pause and be like, if it's not rooted in like deep unconditional love, it is a karmic relationship. It's a karmic
Yes.
lesson. It is
Which is
not
what
the twin
I
flame.
went through in 2012.
Okay,
It was not, it was twin flame-esque,
sure,
but it was a karmic relationship. There wasn't, I never felt positive during ever.
right,
It,
yeah.
it
And
drained
I
me.
think
I
that's
lost
most.
30 pounds.
I was
It
gonna
was,
say it probably like sucked the life out of me, honestly.
it
Um,
literally did.
yeah, yeah. So I just want to be clear about that because of, like you said, all of the misinformation online and people like attached to that, and then that's all they want to talk about, and it's a really skewed perspective of something that is really beautiful. And the lesson for the ultimate lesson, like the overarching lesson, the reason why we're like incarnated as a twin flame, it is about wholeness. And it is about the hard part, the lesson is the separation. And usually twin flames, if it is a true twin flame and it's rooted in unconditional love, there's just something that keeps them separate. Like I have a really good friend that her twin flame lives on the other side of the world. and and with Jay, he was married, right? And it's just always something. And so it's getting back to wholeness no matter what's going on in the physical.
Yes, yes, I can
That
see it like
Yeah.
on a projector screen right now. Like even though their
Mhm.
physical bodies are separate, it's training them to feel the other person as if they're there and not need to be bound by this human animal tendency to constantly need you and need the
Yes.
pheromones and need the chemicals that come with it, where you
Right.
feel, where you, because that ultimately forces you to ascend and allow more of the soul in, which,
Hmm.
if we're talking about real twin flame energy, aren't they the same soul?
Yes. Yes.
Ooh, how does
I know.
that feel to your Scorpio rising and your Libra sun, to who is so focused on possessing or being intimate or focusing on the other when they
Hmm.
are you? And we know from a spiritual standpoint, we've listened to enough podcasts and liked enough memes and read enough books
Hmm.
to know that we're all one and everything is made of source. But it
Hmm.
makes you viscerally have to face what that is.
Hmm. And for someone who was newly initiated and awakened, I don't know what to do with that, right? Like I was just like a fucking mess, like
Oh,
a
yeah.
train wreck. It was so codependent. Like my entire world revolved on whether I talked to him or saw him that day, and it was 2.5 years of that. And Jay was more spiritually elevated than me in when he was in the physical.
Yes.
He is the one, because this was, people weren't talking about this when it first like started with us. He's the one that came to me and he was like, have you heard of a twin flame? Do you know what that is? And I was like, no. And he told me what it was, and he was like, read about it, tell me what you think. And so I came back to him, I was like, well, yeah. So it he had a groundedness about it that I was not capable of,
Right.
when he was in the physical.
Yeah.
And
You
but I
held the
think,
feminine pillar very well.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know how well, but
Well,
I was
I mean,
present in it. We'll say
go
that. But
into an ayahuasca journey and ask for a question directly and straight up and see what kind of answer you get, you
right,
know?
yes, yeah,
So
yeah,
there's a certain, you had to surrender to something.
totally.
You
And
were the incarnation of this one soul that came into the feminine body or the female body and
mhm,
wanted to master femininity so much that you even made that a part of your sexual templating.
yeah,
Okay. So it's
yes,
like you did it very well by being messy, if you all have ever had an ayahuasca journey
right.
or a mama cacao experience.
Yes,
There's a messiness to it.
there is. You're so right. Yeah, but it's of course hindsight is 2020, and I can look back and be like, oh well, yes, that's what was going on. But at the time, I had no one around me to talk to about this other than Jay. We had it when I said my gifts opened up, like after the first night that we slept together, he and I had a telepathic connection that was so strong that if he meditated across town and I tapped in, I could hear him like he was on the phone.
Yeah.
And he would call me after sometimes and clarify what he was saying. And I was just like,
Wow.
what is happening to me? And I knew
Yeah.
nobody, like I knew
It's the same
nobody that,
soul.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I knew nobody that I could talk to about it. If it was even more isolating than the affair.
Yeah.
um, because I felt crazy.
Yeah. I
Um,
bet.
and and at the time there was not the resources online. Like this was 2018. Yeah.
Of course, which is the year I went through Kundalini Awakening.
Yeah. Oh, me too, apparently.
uh,
Yeah. And it just was this spiral. But then when we would be together, time didn't exist. Like there was nothing outside of he and I, and it literally felt like the universe just opened up.
yeah.
and and we weren't even in physical space, like even though we were it. I don't know how to describe, I'm not doing a good job, but that's the best I got.
The
And
intuitives listening can feel into that because I can feel it.
yeah, and there was just this exchange that felt like an overlay of the same soul, right? Like I had knowledge of him that makes no sense for me to have. And through that I had knowledge of um the way that spirit moved, and the way that I was in communication, and that I wasn't ever alone even when we weren't in that space. But it was my first doorway into that. And that, because that came through sexual exploration, that's why my path, I think, took the turn that it did. And I ended up doing the priestess work that I do now, because I know that there are many doorways into that space, right? But I know a surefire one. Like I know how to get there.
Yeah.
And it's honestly like, if you could pick, isn't that the one that you would want to pick to get into the spiritual realm? So, it's through, right? Like we can,
Or
there's lots of ways to
eating.
get there. Yeah. That too. uh, but yeah, so it was this crazy double life that I was living and that he was living, and that I couldn't talk to anybody. I felt like, about any of it. I had like two friends that knew about Jay and I at the time, and they were so worried about me. They were just like, "This is not going to end well, no matter how it ends." And I'm like, "Yeah, I don't know. I think it's going to be fine."
Mm.
Yeah, but I there's no way for me to tell this story without telling all of it. But if you all want the details and how everything escalated, I'm going to refer you back to the book, because there is a lot there, and like the specifics of how all this unfolded. Yeah, but he we had a show one night that got canceled. Like we drove up there and there was nobody there because it was like Christmas time and whatever. So they just sent us away, and so we stayed at a cabin. And I had a beautiful night with him, and he left. And at 5 o'clock the next morning, I got a call that he was in the hospital and they didn't think he was going to make it. He was fine. It's going to make me emotional. There's no way around it. I'm
That's okay.
sorry.
He's
Um,
doing that. He wants this to happen.
yeah. He was fine. He was in my arms. Everything was good. And then he wasn't. He had an aortic tear that spanned the length of his body. Um, and they tried a couple surgeries and nothing worked. And then he was just having,
That's sort of impossible to do unless you're in some kind of, it's like I'm being shown that even though the cause of death was supernatural. Like it wasn't like he fell off of a 3-story building, or he was in some kind of major accident, or he had some, it was like a choice.
Yeah. And that last night together, like I feel the same way that you just said, and I'll tell you why. That last night together, we had just had a song go on the radio. We heard it for the first time that week.
Wow.
Um, we talked about what life was going to look like, and I think I felt him make a decision in his spirit that he was going to leave his marriage, and like we were going to do this touring thing, and it was going to be, and I think that spirit was like, nope, that's not how this is going to go down. um I feel that strongly in my bones because it was just too, I don't want to say coincidental, that's not the right word. um it just felt like the minute that we decided to be in union here, spirit was like, that's not the lesson. That's
That's
not
right.
what you all signed up for.
Yeah.
And he left. And
Like I had a best friend who passed away about 15 years ago, and she had epilepsy, and she called the day before to tell me, and I didn't answer, but I was told later that she was calling to tell me that she was in fact going to have the surgery where they put the thing in her chest and it stopped
mm-hmm,
the seizures, and then
mm-hmm,
she suffocated in her sleep the next day. You know? It's like, and we had gone to all of the locations that we went to as kids
mm-hmm.
the day before, to the movies, to the
Wow.
park. Like, what were we doing that? It was so like a
Yeah.
choice of hers.
Yeah.
So there was a knowing on my end, but also it was just shocking
Right.
because of she was just about to improve her quality of life and like be able to flourish, and then that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It was wild.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
here we
It's
are at the threshold of this twin flame activation, this sacred union, this immense joy and connection in things you've never felt before, in this universal opening, and then his physical being retires. And so, where are you at now? Not now in this moment, but then.
then so it unfolded in the worst way possible. um the first night that he was in the hospital for like 20 days, I'm pretty sure, but the very first night that he was there, I got into a screaming argument with his wife, and because she wouldn't let me see him. And um basically couldn't go back to the hospital. So
Whoa.
I couldn't be around him at all. Like through all of this, I remember just being in my apartment totally alone, um, and trying to check in with him psychically. And he was really confused, like, because they had him really drugged, and I
Yeah.
would check in, I'd be like, do you know where you are? And he would be
Yeah.
like, no. And I would tell him, and then he would say, what's happening to me? And I have to tell him all over again. And I was like, oh,
Right.
this is a nightmare. Um, so I didn't get to see him at all, like in the hospital. And then he passed a few days after Christmas, and I couldn't go to the funeral, or I felt like I couldn't go to the funeral. I just didn't want
Right.
that. Um, and then I I had no idea that I was pregnant with our child, and I wasn't eating. I was drinking myself to death. I wasn't taking care of myself, and I miscarried. Um,
Whoa.
yeah, I was just like, I had just gone back to work. I didn't go to work for like a month. And I had just gone back to work and miscarried at work. And so it was this like blow after blow after blow. Um, just because I just didn't know, I just, it was like the last thing on my mind, um, until it wasn't. And I just descended into this like the darkest night of soul for a year. Um, was just like I felt like a shell with like a little whisper of somebody that used to be inside. Like, um, and it was so frustrating too, because I didn't understand why I could hear him so well when he was in the physical psychically, and then he dies and I can't hear him at all either. And I'm like, it felt like the like insult to injury, right? I couldn't make sense of it, and it just made it worse. Like, it just, because it was so silent. And friends of mine and my sister, who I'm like really close to, like everyone was, nobody knew what to do, right? And I didn't know what to tell them that I needed, because everything that I wanted was gone, and I didn't see any way of like a future. And honestly, if I, like, trigger warning, but I would have taken myself out like multiple times if I could have just found the will to even do that. Like, I didn't even have the energy to do that.
Yeah.
I was like, I can't even think about how to do that or plan that. Like no energy to do it. And my therapist, we had many conversations. Just, I would be really, really worried about you if you weren't in that space, because I know that you are suicidal, but I also know that, I couldn't even do that. So that was the longest year of my life, by far. And then, so the following January, so that would be 2021, I started seeing messages everywhere about ayahuasca, which is a word that I did not know, I had never heard before, knew nothing about. Um, but it caught my attention because it was just showing up everywhere. And I was like, what is this? And then one day a friend of mine called me and she was like, hey, I just tried to send you a interview with your favorite author. She's like, but I couldn't get it sent via text for some reason, so I'd email it to you. She's like, but check it out, it's really good. And I was like, all right. So I got home and I click on the link, and it was not the interview, it was a broken link, and it was a documentary on plant medicine.
Wow.
And I watched every bit of that, and I knew it was Jay. And I was like, all right, I know this is him. I know he's trying to reach me. And I researched, I looked up, because the main medicine that kept showing up was ayahuasca. And so I looked at retreats, and then of course COVID had shut down like you couldn't travel. And I was like, this is just like a carrot that they're just dangling, and I can't like get to it. And a dear friend of mine called me out of the blue. Well, actually, I said to Spirit and to Jay, it was like, if this is you and you're trying to get me to do this, I need it to be affordable and accessible, and I will do it. And so a friend of mine called the next day and told me that she had a group that she did plant medicine ceremony with, and she thought it would really help me. And was that something that I would be interested in? And it was like, a fraction of what I was going to pay to go to Peru, and, closer to home, and like snip, snap. And we were in a retreat by that weekend. And I walk in, and this lovely gentleman in front of me is there, and we did not know each other at all at the time. And
This was actually in February of 2021, and that was the weekend of my Saturn return. It was actually exactly at 6 degrees of Aquarius in the false matrix zodiac. It was at 6 degrees where it was when I was born that weekend. And so I called it my Saturn retreat, my Saturn return retreat. And when I got there, they said, oh, there's 2 more people coming and you don't know them, but you'll get over it. And I was like, okay, sure. The more, the merrier. And I'll let you continue.
I was scared to death to do that. I have all kinds of allergies and like food allergies. And I just kept like replaying like disaster scenarios in my mind of like, I'm going to go into anaphylactic shock and like all this stuff. So I was really, really scared about doing that. And up until you and I spoke, I almost backed out. Like I
Yeah.
almost was like, peace out. But I need to tell one little backstory of Jay and I
Yeah.
for this to like click. But one evening, Jay and I were in my apartment and we were slow dancing naked. It was a really like really intimate moment. And he put his fingers around my wrist like this. And I was like, what are you doing? And he was like, don't worry about it. And I was like, okay. So I forgot about it. But then a week later, he gave me a bracelet that he made for me. It was a leather cuff bracelet. And he had measured me that night
Yeah.
by doing that. And
Oh,
and so when I met Chrys, we talked for a little bit, and you were like, someone is here and wants to talk to you. Is it okay, if I, channel? And I was like,
yeah. I
yes.
remember it. I remember it very clearly. It was like, I could see the hat. I could see the facial hair. I could see the height. It was just very, very strong. And I was just like, okay, there is definitely, because normally I keep it to myself, but I couldn't. I was like, I just started to describe him. And that's when you poked your head from around the corner because you were in the
Mhm.
living room and you were like, I think I know who that is. And I was like, okay, good. I didn't know where it was going to lead. I was just like, okay, good. We got somebody. I felt like Teresa Caputo. I was like, all right, we're coming over here.
Yeah, I heard you were talking to my friend that I came with, and she was like trying to figure it out, and I was like, oh my god, that's like, I know that's him. But how bizarre, because again, this was like, I've been isolated in the Appalachian Mountains, right, with no one to talk about, nobody, everybody, nobody I could mention this stuff to. And so I always just felt crazy. And so to hear you start describing him, I was still really unsure of what was going on because I didn't know you. I didn't know what you did, for a living or anything like that. And when I poked my head around the corner and said, I think I know who that is, you said, it's gonna make me cry. Does this and dancing mean anything to you? And nobody knew about that. Like nobody knew about that. It was such an intimate moment. And that's when I knew, like, I was like, yeah, this is like this is him. And then, we talked quite a bit, and this was before ceremony. So it was just like he was telling you a lot and you were relaying, and it was just so validating. And I remember that he said that I brought you here and I knew that you would know it was me. And Chrys, you said you're gonna hear him again tonight.
Wow. Because I
And that
barely remember this conversation, by the way.
yeah.
Because it was just at the time, you were just another person I did a
Right.
sudden reading for.
Who showed up to your Saturn return uninvited.
I know.
So,
And it was like, looking back at it, I'm like, I never remember what I say in these readings, but
yeah.
it's just I do remember some moments, but it
Mm-hmm.
didn't stick out to me that way. And so to know that it was such an pivotal moment in your experience and that there's even a chapter in the book
Yeah.
about it,
Yeah.
it's like, wow, I'm so glad to be the instrument and to be on this path so that these moments can happen because it's spirit doing it.
Oh, yes. And, I also feel fortunate to be a part of it. Like I always say that my favorite love story that I've ever read or seen or heard is mine.
Yeah.
Like it just, I knew we weren't done. Like I knew Jay and I weren't done. I knew it wasn't possible because of the level of connection and all that I had seen.
Yeah.
But, there was a year there that, I was going to meet him one way or the other.
Right.
So it was, but, thank God for you, Chrys, that day, because I would have walked out. I feel pretty certain. It was exactly what I needed to hear to go into journey.
Yeah.
Um, and
And that was sort of the beginning for you
yeah, it
in many
absolutely was.
ways.
Yeah, in a lot of ways it was. And it's really funny for me to have this conversation with you now after all that we've been through over
Yeah.
the last like 3 years, 4 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I don't know that we've ever talked about it in this way. So I love hearing, what stuck for you and what didn't, because that conversation is burned into
Yeah.
my, like, it will go to the grave with me, because it was that,
Yeah.
that pivotal. But when I went into ceremony, the minute that the medicine dropped in, there he was.
Yeah.
And I could hear him just like I could before. And it, it just validated everything that I already knew. But what I didn't really realize that night is it started a process that would unfold over the next like 2 years of
Yeah.
my gifts getting stronger and stronger and stronger. Um, and still, like, I still have sometimes things happen and I'm like, oh, that's new. Like,
Right.
that's never, like, I've never heard something like that or seen something in that way before. Like, it's still going, but there was a pretty intense period after that where things just started unfolding. And Jay has been my guide. I mean, for lack of a better word, I mean, he's still my lover. He's, my um confidant, and but he's also like my ally in the spirit realm. And if I need him, or I need to know something, sometimes if it's not clear, I'll just ask him and he'll
Yeah.
relay it. He's
Yeah.
almost like a translator sometimes, even in like
Yes.
sessions or
Yes.
readings,
Hmm.
because I hear him so clearly, and I don't always hear other people's guides as clearly.
Right.
So I'll ask him, like, babe, what are they saying? Like, what's happening here? But there was another, so I got back from that retreat and some really scary things showed up in my awareness, that almost scared me into wanting to like cut it off.
Yeah.
I saw a lot of really dark, frightening things,
Yeah.
that I was going to say, I don't know that I was ready for, but I mean, I guess, like, it is what it is. You're ready when you're
Yeah.
ready.
This
But
was a shamanic initiation for you.
it definitely was. Yeah.
Well, I don't want to leave everyone on a cliffhanger already, but I am. So we're going to have you back for a second part, because I have more questions for you. We're going to dive more deeply into some other things that we experienced together and went, and that is in the book. If you want to go ahead and spoil yourself, spoil the whole thing, go ahead and get the book. It's available everywhere now and on Amazon, and we'll put the links in the description below. But we're going to have you on for a part two, and we're going to go deeper into what opened for you, where your path has taken you now, the all of the sexual energies that have come up in your process and in our process together, in some very Whoopi Goldberg, Patrick Swayze type of. The whole time we've been talking here, I keep hearing Unchained Melody from Ghost. And so there's an experience that Jen and I had together that Jay and her initiated, that I am so honored to be a part of, that we are going to share in part two. But for now, we'll leave you with this, because this is incredible and I want people to sit with this and digest it. Jen, tell us how we can work with you, where to find you, your website, where to follow you, all of that.
Wonderful. Um, so the best place to probably reach me is my website, which is themelodyofmissjen.com. I'm also on Instagram and TikTok, but Substack is kind of my favorite social media. So I'm
Yeah.
also on there. It's Spirit Medicine with Jen Fields. And like you said, the link will be in the bio. And if you want to pick up Melody of Fire, it's available on Amazon.
Yes, it is. And I'm in here too.
Yes, you are.
I so appreciate you being here and thank you so much. If you all want to work with Jen, go to themelodyofmissjen.com or jenfields.substack.com. Again, all of these links will be in the show notes below. And if you would like to work with me or feel called to ask me any questions or allow me into your journey, you can go to chrisking.com, where I make incredible websites for spiritual entrepreneurs, ascended CEOs, branding. I do business mentorship, psychic business mentorship for people who are wanting to step into their soul mission. I also have downloaded a newly formed version of astrology called Ascended Astrology. So you can go to ascended-astrology.com to learn all about that. And then, of course, I also offer medicine retreats all over the country and the world in Hawaii, Sedona, Shasta, Joshua Tree, soon to be Egypt, and Stonehenge, and other places in the world. And we also offer microdosing and psychedelic integration. You can go to the Medicine Alchemist, or whoop, I keep calling it the Medicine Alchemist, just medicinealchemist.com if you're interested in that. And we so appreciate you being here with us, Jen, being so vulnerable, so open, being willing to share this process that at one time you suffered with in the dark and was all alone going through. And now it's part of your medicine and your magic. And I see you and I appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you.
We'll see you all next time for part 2 of Ascend the Matrix. You all have a wonderful day.